everyone, and welcome to this episode of My Alphabet of Hair. The letter for this episode is the letter Q, and whilst I initially struggled to come up with a subject for this letter, it turns out it was staring me right in the face the whole time. It's Q for Quiff. Quiffs are like the bob of haircuts for men. No matter what era it is, it always pops up as a trend of some description, although I have to say they can be for women too. The Quiff was considered quite a rebellious hairstyle back in its heyday. But where does the name come from originally, and is it a popular hairstyle right now? Let me give you a brief history lesson. From around the 10th century, both men and women wore a close-fitting cap that covered the top, back and sides of the head, and this was known as a coif. By the 13th century, almost everybody in Britain and some of Europe were wearing them. Early coifs were usually made of unadorned white linen and tied under the chin, but a male coif was a type of armour made of chainmail, which covered the head, neck and shoulders, but not the face. It eventually fell out of popularity with men in the 14th century and was then mostly worn by women and children. By the Elizabethan Era, which was in the 16th century, followed by the early Jacobean Era, which was also in the 16th century too, coifs were often decorated with blackwork embroidery and lace edging. They were worn on their own, either indoor or outdoors, and also under gable hoods and different types of hats. The word coif is surprisingly similar to quiff, which could imply that coifs may have inspired the word quiff for a hairstyle. The word itself is French, but can also be dated back to an old German word for cap. The word hairdresser in French is coiffeur. In the 18th century, the Pompadour hairdo was named after Jeanne-Antoinette Poisson-Lenormand d'Etoile, I hope that's right, or Madame de Pompadour, the mistress of Louis XV. She was born in the French town of Arnac-Pompadour. The Pompadour was a hairstyle pioneered by this then on-trend actress, who soon became a sign of wealth and status. The hair was pulled away from the face and high onto the head at the front and sides. This swirl of what looked like whipped cream hair was teased into shape over a wire frame. Eventually it became more extreme and over-exaggerated. The Macaroni Fashion trend was a uniform for well-travelled males who wore a flamboyant, rebellious look to reflect the styles of the various countries that they had toured. This look includes a Pompadour-like exaggerated hair wig. Cut to the 19th century. The extravagant use of wire frames gives way to a more practical, utilitarian way of wearing the Pompadour using a postiche. These are pads stuffed with false hair or your own hair collected to create volume underneath the styled hair. A fashion known as the Gibson Girl revived the 18th century Pompadour by piling hair away from the face in a swirl-like shape, piled high on top of the head. It's a more practical style than the original Pompadour. The Pompadour was now no longer just for royalty and aristocrats, but for the emerging middle classes too. This style was popular with women right the way through until World War I, when styles became about being more practical and out of necessity and preference. From the late 19th century onwards, the growth of photography and travel to previously inaccessible and unvisited places meant that there was an increase in curiosity for different cultures. East meets West and ancient meets modern, each taking something from the other to create a kind of melting pot. A fascination for what was termed as the exotic entered the Western design world. It suddenly became quite fashionable to copy styles of tribal identity using dress and hairstyles. Native American women, such as those known as the Seminole, or Seminole, who are Native American people originally from Florida, wore Pompadour-like hairstyles using card and postiche-type reinforcements. Several tribes in Africa, Asia and America also saw men wearing their hair longer away from their face and in a high style at the front. Hairstyles have long been used to set people apart within their tribe according to their roles within their actual individual tribe. So for example, men have worn their hair differently if they were about to go to war. When Africans were brought to Europe and America as slaves, they were forced to lose their hairstyles, which gave them their personal and tribal identity. As different hairstyles became popular in the 20th century, pomade was introduced for dressing hair. Pomade had actually been around for centuries as a product, and it was initially made from animal fats, but in 1925 the first pomades using petroleum jelly alongside cheaply available oils began to be produced more cost effectively. Soon both men and women were creating adventurous new styles with this versatile pomade. So for example, slick bobs and short waves for the ladies, and slick back or pompadour styles for men with longer hair. In 1928, County Chemicals, based in Birmingham, where I'm from in the UK, produced Brylcreem. This was initially used in barbershops only, and the cream was a roaring success, plus it was the real beginning of home hairstyling for men. In the 1940s, the pompadour hairstyle returned for women alongside the victory roll, doing the job of keeping hair high on the top of the head at the front. This was now for more practical reasons than ever before. It was to keep women's hair out of their eyes when working laborious jobs during World War II. It was also an inexpensive way to bring glamour to home-styled hairdos. In the 1950s, it became the time once again for men to get a slice of the pompadour pie, as post-war rebellious young men turned to a hairstyle that was going to rebel against short military cuts and wartime utility that they'd been having to wear. In this post-war decade of rebellion, women also began to dramatically cut their hair short, whilst men were growing their hair longer after all the military crops. People were basically searching for decadence, fun, and flamboyant styles after the trauma of the war. The quiff also became very popular in the late 1950s with the rise of rock and roll and teenage rebellion. Elvis, James Dean, Cliff Richard, or even Quiff Richard as he was sometimes known, Eddie Cochran, Little Richard ensured that this hairstyle stayed top of the cool charts. The 50s quiff was slicked up and back off from the face using pomade and a comb to style it. It was a pretty simple to do thing, with the hair product market becoming much more lucrative, with many choices of different products such as hairsprays and men's grooming products. These product companies also went to town on their advertising too. The British teddy boy subculture also adopted the quiff as part of their look. It was a nod to the Edwardian dandy style that they'd adopted also in their dress sense. Teddy boys appeared in Britain during the mid-1950s as a rebellious side effect to the introduction of American rock and roll music. The teddy boy was uniquely a British phenomenon. Their style featured tapered trousers, long jackets that bore a resemblance to post-war American zoot suits, and fancy waistcoats. Cut to the 1960s, the Beatles came along and ruined it for men by growing their hair into mop tops with not a quiff in sight or any kind of pomade, Brylcreem or oil. The closest thing to the rebellious pompadour in the 60s was the ladies' bouffant, a nest of teased and hairsprayed hair. The quiff was suddenly considered old hat, as a newer, youthful, rebellious look was achieved through new fashions and hairstyles. However, in the 1980s there was a return to the quiff hairstyle, made popular in the 50s with the introduction of the flat top haircut. The 1950s American style of classic Levi's 501s became a must-have item, along with a white t-shirt and a leather jacket. Think Bros. By this point though, it was all style and no rebellion. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, there was also a movement by a number of new teddy boys to revive the 1950s teddy boy style. A group of teddy boy revivalists in the Tottenham area of North London formed the Edwardian Drape Society, T.E.D.S, TEDS. This particular group concentrated on reclaiming the style which they felt had become bastardised by the pop and glam rock movements of the 1970s. These TEDs became the subject of a short film, also known as The Teddy Boys, which was made by renowned fashion photographer Bruce Weber. And so to the present day. The quiff has become the staple go-to hairstyle of retro fashion for men. The latest extreme modern quiffs have gotten bigger and higher, especially with the reintroduction of modern barbershops, where the new short back and sides, now more commonly known as the fade, has been made popular in afro hair barbering. There's now also such a vast range of styling products available to create this hairstyle in varying forms that it's become so much easier to create than ever before. The pompadour style is also popular amongst women, either trying to create a vintage style 1940s look, or in modern quiffs where the hair is slicked and they've got shaved sides, almost looking a bit sort of punk or tribal-esque. I've been inspired by and created my own varying forms of the quiff over my career in fashion, as it also looks great in a fashion picture when it suits the clothes, etc. I've even just recently created this exact hairstyle on British supermodel Stella Tennant for a new campaign for the charity Oxfam, which is promoting the idea of sustainable fashion in its campaign that released this month, and this is called Secondhand September. And should you wish to create a quiff on yourself but unsure how to do it, you can watch my how-to quiff tutorials that are available also on my YouTube channel. And there's your mini history lesson on quiffs. As you know, I've got really curly hair, so it's quite hard to get my hair into a quiff, but this is my version, which is a nice little inflatable jobby. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode. If you like this video and want to see more, then you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is here, and you can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.